Right, on this month's bike review, we're sticking with a similar theme to the SWM from last month. We're going for a middle-sized engine bike with a kind of middle-sized price, but there's a second reason for it. This month's bike review is on a bike that has a very close relationship with the KTM 690 Enduro R, which is a bike being used by many round-the-world adventurers. This month's bike review is the Husky 701 Enduro. Right, before we get into any of the detail in terms of the review of this bike, let's just talk about the name. Now I call it Husqvarna. Now I'm told that sounds like I'm saying an A between the Q and the V, and you should say it Husqvarna, which sounds exactly like I said it a minute ago, but anyway, Husqvarna, we got it. Now, there's a bit of a checkered history with this brand. So they used to be their own brand, then for a very short period of time, they were owned by BMW. Then owned by KTM. Now KTM have brought together Husqvarna and Husaberg. So what we have here is a Husqvarna bike based on a KTM bike with Husaberg colours. Are you still with me? Right. The other question is, how does this brand sit within the KTM family? Now we all know KTM is ready to race, and the Husqvarna apparently is not so much ready to race, more ready to ride really fast on the roads. Let's see. Back in 2015, the 701 Enduro and its supermoto bad boy brother were Husqvarna's first offering since KTM's management took over. In some ways, it's a bit like looking at the Toyota GT86. You start with a great vehicle, change the badge, make a few tweaks, and behold the Subaru BRZ. The 701 Enduro is basically a KTM 690 Enduro R, but with three very clear differences, namely to its engine maps, to its suspension, and to the bodywork. Back in 2015, the 701 Enduro and its supermoto bad boy brother were Husqvarna's first offering since KTM's management took over. In some ways, it's a bit like looking at the Toyota GT86. You start with a great vehicle, change the badge, make a few tweaks, and behold the Subaru BRZ. The 701 Enduro is basically a KTM 690 Enduro R, but with three very clear differences, namely to its engine maps, to its suspension, and to the bodywork. Husqvarna say that by softening the suspension and making the throttle more predictable, they have made it more accessible, comfortable, and enjoyable for the everyday rider. And you know what? They've largely succeeded. The slipper clutch is a joy, helping to make it well-mannered and a really easy bike to ride as long as you treat the throttle with respect. But that doesn't stop it wanting to pull wheelies in first, second and third if you don't. All I need to learn now is how to wheelie properly, and then I'll be able to demonstrate. But that's for another day. Ride the bike for, I don't know, just over an hour now. I just wanted to stop and give a really quick first impression. One word springs to mind: hooligan. It's a hooligan's bike, and that reminds me of the 690, because basically it's pretty much the same bike. It's the same chassis, it's the same engine, but they have tuned it slightly differently, so it is a smoother ride, but it is a total hooligan's bike. It is really quick, 70 horsepower, 145 kilos dry. It just reminds me of everything I loved about riding the 690. You do feel like a 17-year-old when you first, well, I used to think of the DT175 when I was a kid. It just makes you feel like a hooligan. However, it is quite a tall bike. Not a problem for me because I'm quite tall. But I'd like to demonstrate. Let me just bring in my able assistant, Mr. Thomas Woodrow. Tom, please demonstrate where, if you haven't got the length of leg that I have, how easy this bike is to get on and off of.
You ready for this?
Tom.
This is going to be incredibly graceful. I can't. I'm not going to be able to take the side stand up. I can't. Look at my leg. My leg doesn't even reach the peg on that side. That's it. If I put my weight on it, I can get
there you go.
the peg, but then to put the foot down on this side, I'm going to need to do a shuffle. Yeah, I'll leave this one to you.
So there you go, a bike for tall people. So specifically, what has changed? Well, suspension. The 701 gets WP all round with 275mm of travel over the 690's 250mm, and the forks are lighter than a conventional upside down fork. The closed cartridge 4CS forks were specifically designed for Husqvarna by WP, but as hugely interesting as it is, it's how they look that really stands out. The sight of those forks hits you right square between the eyes, like a set of Greek pillars holding up the Parthenon. They just look so solid, and they're easy to work with. Adjustment is really simple even with gloves on. I wound the compression right up tight to see how much it improved the road manners, and it did make a real difference. Turn-in was a little sharper and there was much less wallow, pretty much as you'd expect. Of course, I'd never advise taking your hands off the bars to adjust the forks whilst riding, but I am reliably informed that it's easy peasy. Also, much as you'd expect, the Enduro doesn't have the whacking great 4-pot brakes of the Supermoto, but the Brembo twin pots are more than capable. Even with those long pillars of forks, there was minimal squirming under hard braking, and I never felt like it was getting out of hand. The brakes are assisted by the latest Bosch 9.1 MP ABS, which can be disabled completely via a button on the dash. The smoother fuel map makes a 701 less snatchy than the 690, but then I never found the throttle maps on the 690 to be a problem in the first place. I'm sure, to the professional palate, the difference in the mapping would be more obvious, but not so much to little old me. Oh, and there's an extra litre of fuel, taking the tank up to 13 litres. Lastly, the bodywork. Now, Husqvarna tells us that it has been altered from the 690 for comfort, with rubber-mounted handlebars and a more comfortable seat. Well, the seat doesn't feel any different to me at all, but the bodywork is interesting. Husqvarna have obviously gone out of their way to make it visually quite different from the 690. Obviously, the colours are different, but there is a big difference in the rear bodywork. The 701 has a much deeper and overall much larger rear section, or, to give it its proper name, the single-piece polyamide rear subframe and tank, all part of making it look a little less ready to race and more ready to go for a great grinning ride. Our jury of 2 was out. I liked the bodywork, Tom a bit less so. Okay, so what did I think of the Husqvarna 701? Well, there's not many words to describe it really, apart from 2. Grin factor. And that's how I described the KTM 690 Enduro R 18 months ago or so. And it's just the same, although maybe a little softer and a little easier to ride, a bit more road oriented. But it is huge fun. It is quick, it handles well. And although I didn't do a lot off-road, I can imagine it would be absolutely fabulous, just like the 690 was. But I think the better comparison is probably to think about it next to the SWM that we looked at last month. I mean, there's not dissimilar prices, engine size is very similar, weight, kind of similar. Now, if you went with your head, looking for an adventure bike, every time I think you go for the SWM. It's a bit more practical, you get the hard luggage with it, it's not quite so mad. But if you went with your heart, just like I do, every single time, rucksack, bit of soft luggage, Husqvarna 701 every single time.